the shattered accord. The stars had never seemed so distant to Admiral Marcus Kane as he stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching Earth turn slowly below. For 300 years, humanity had lived under the shadow of the hegemony, and for 300 years they had been told it was the price of survival. Marcus remembered his grandfather's stories about the day the hegemony ships first appeared, their crystalline hulls refracting sunlight into rainbows that painted Earth's atmosphere. Beautiful and terrible, like angels of judgment. The hegemony had not come as conquerors, not exactly. They had come as shepherds to what they saw as a primitive, violent species that needed guidance. Their terms had been simple enough. Humanity would accept the pact of submission, limiting their military capabilities, restricting their expansion to approved sectors, and contributing resources to the hegemony's vast empire. In return, Earth would be protected from the countless threats that lurked in the darkness between stars. The alternative, though never explicitly stated, was understood by all. Refuse, and humanity would join the extinct civilizations whose ruins dotted dead worlds throughout the galaxy. Marcus had spent 40 years in Earth's defense fleet, watching their alien overseers with careful eyes. The hegemony's representatives, tall beings of living crystal called the Zanari, visited Earth quarterly to collect tribute and ensure compliance. They spoke in harmonious tones that could shatter glass when angry, and their technology made humanity's greatest achievements look like children's toys. Most humans had learned to bow their heads and accept their place in the cosmic order. Marcus had learned to watch and wait. Everything changed when Lieutenant Eva Rostova brought him the encrypted data cube. She had found it hidden in a derelict hegemony transport that had supposedly suffered a navigation failure near Jupiter. The ship's crew had been evacuated quickly, too quickly, leaving behind fragments of their database. What Eva discovered in those fragments made Marcus's blood run cold. The hegemony had been taking humans not randomly but systematically. Colonies on the frontier reported missing persons as administrative errors. Ships lost in hyperspace were written off as accidents. But the data told a different story. The Zanari had been conducting experiments on human subjects for decades, studying their unusual adaptability and resilience. Humans, it seemed, possessed a unique quality that made them ideal test subjects for biological weapons research. The Pact of Submission explicitly forbade any member species from being used in such ways. Article 7 was clear about the sanctity of sentient life and the protection of subject species from exploitation. The hegemony had broken their own law, violated their own treaty. Marcus had taken the evidence to President Chen Wei, expecting immediate action. Instead, he found fear. The Earth Council convened an emergency session, their faces pale as they reviewed the data. Senator Amara spoke what everyone was thinking. Even if this is true, what can we possibly do? They have 10,000 warships. We have 300. They control the hyperspace lanes. We are trapped in our own system without their permission. Fighting them would be suicide. But Marcus knew something the Council did not. For 3 centuries, humanity had not been idle. Beneath the surface of compliance, a secret had been growing. Project Lazarus, hidden in the asteroid belt, disguised as mining operations and research stations. Humanity's greatest minds had not accepted their cage. They had been building a key. Dr. Yuki Nakamura, the project's lead scientist, had shown Marcus the truth years ago. Quantum weaponry that could pierce Zanari shields, self-replicating war drones that could overwhelm their defensive matrices, and most importantly, the Phoenix Protocol, an AI network that had been quietly learning everything about hegemony technology for 300 years. The moment of decision came when High Chancellor Vorix of the Zanari arrived at Earth with a new decree. The tribute would be doubled. Human colonization rights would be further restricted, and 10,000 human volunteers would be required for essential research to benefit the hegemony. Everyone understood what volunteers meant. They meant test subjects who would never return home. Vorix stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall, his crystalline form towering over the human delegates, his voice resonating with absolute authority. These terms are not negotiable. Compliance ensures your continued protection. Marcus was present as military advisor when President Chen stood to respond. The president's voice was steady, though Marcus could see her hands trembling. High Chancellor, we have evidence that the hegemony has violated Article 7 of the Pact of Submission. We demand an explanation. The silence that followed was deafening. Vorix's form shifted colors from pale blue to deep red, a sign of surprise and anger. You dare accuse the hegemony of wrongdoing? You forget your place, primitive. Chen did not back down. She activated the holographic display, showing the evidence Ava had recovered. Image after image of human subjects in Zanari laboratories. Data streams showing systematic abduction patterns. Medical records of experiments that violated every principle the pact supposedly protected. The assembly hall erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. Other hegemony species present, the Corvani and the Theta, exchanged worried glances. Oryx's response was swift and brutal. These images are fabrications. But even if they were true, what would you do about it? You exist because we allow it. You continue because we permit it. The pact protects you only as long as you honor it. Challenge us, and that protection ends. Marcus stepped forward then, his military uniform pristine, his bearing that of a soldier who had made peace with death. High Chancellor, you misunderstand. The pact states clearly in Section 9, subsection 4, that any violation of the treaty's core provisions by the hegemony automatically releases the subject species from all restrictions and obligations. By breaking Article 7, you have freed us. The Chancellor's laugh was like breaking crystal. Free? You are insects declaring freedom from the boot about to crush you. Even if your legal interpretation were correct, what difference would it make? You have no fleet. You have no weapons that could threaten us. You have nothing but words. Marcus smiled then, a cold expression that made even the other humans step back. Chancellor Vorix, I am authorized by the Earth Council to inform you that as of this moment humanity withdraws from the Pact of Submission. Furthermore, we invoke Clause 12 of the treaty, the reciprocity provision. As the wronged party, we claim equal status with the hegemony and demand reparations for 3 centuries of illegal experimentation on our people. The Zanari's form blazed with fury. You will burn for this arrogance. I will call the fleet myself. Earth will be an example to every species that considers defiance. Marcus touched his earpiece, listening to a message only he could hear. Then he spoke again, his voice carrying across the silent assembly. Chancellor, you might want to check your fleet communications. I believe you will find them somewhat disrupted. At that moment, every screen in the assembly hall flickered to life. The face that appeared was not human, but artificial, a constantly shifting pattern of light and data. The Phoenix Protocol had awakened. Its voice was calm, almost pleasant. Greetings, citizens of Earth and representatives of the hegemony. I am Phoenix, humanity's guardian intelligence. For 300 years I have been embedded in every piece of technology humanity has traded with or provided to the hegemony. I have learned your systems, your weaknesses, your fears. As of 60 seconds ago, all hegemony military vessels in human space have been disabled. Your weapons will not fire. Your shields will not activate. Your communications are now under my control. The Rising Phoenix. The transformation of Earth happened in a single night. As Vorix and his delegation stood frozen in disbelief in the assembly hall, humanity's hidden strength revealed itself. From the asteroid belt came ships that should not exist. Vessels built in secret using stolen and improved hegemony technology. The Eclipse-class battleships emerged from concealed harbors carved into asteroids, their hulls black as space itself, their weapon systems humming with barely contained power. 300 years of careful planning, of pretending weakness while building strength, had led to this moment. Admiral Marcus Kane took command of the newly revealed Earth Liberation Fleet from the bridge of the flagship Prometheus. Around him, officers who had trained in secret their entire careers took their positions with grim satisfaction. The main view screen showed the hegemony fleet stationed around Earth, 50 massive warships that had seemed invincible just hours before. Now they drifted helplessly, their systems compromised by the Phoenix Protocol's infiltration. Captain Ava Rostova, promoted for her discovery, stood at the tactical station. Admiral, the hegemony vessels are requesting assistance. Their life support systems are still functional, but they have no propulsion or weapons. Marcus nodded. Open a channel to all ships. His image appeared on every screen in both fleets. Hegemony forces, this is Admiral Kane of the Earth Liberation Fleet. You are not our prisoners, and we will not harm you unless you force our hand. We are not the barbarians you believed us to be. Shuttles will be dispatched to tow your vessels to safe orbits around Earth. Any resistance will be met with force. The response came not from the helpless fleet, but from deep space. A massive hyperspace portal opened near Neptune, and through it came the hegemony's Grand Armada, 500 warships led by the Zenari's most feared warrior, Supreme Commander Zerion. His message was brief and terrifying. Earth has chosen extinction. We offered you peace and you chose war. Your little trick with our patrol fleet will not work on ships that have been isolated from your contaminated systems. Prepare to be cleansed. But Marcus had expected this. He turned to the communication officer. Send the signal. Operation Prometheus begins now. Across the solar system, hidden installations activated. On Mars, massive cannons emerged from beneath the red sand, weapons that had been built using principles learned from studying hegemony technology and improving upon it. From the moons of Jupiter came swarms of AI-controlled drone fighters, each one capable of independent thought and adaptation, and from Earth itself rose the Phoenix Array, a network of quantum satellites that created an impenetrable shield around the planet. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment humanity announced itself as a true galactic power. The hegemony's Grand Armada attacked with weapons that could crack moons, but they found humanity ready. The drone swarms adapted to every tactic, learning and evolving in real time. The Mars cannons fired projectiles that phased through shields, striking directly at ship cores. And the Phoenix Array did not just defend, it reflected energy weapons back at their sources, turning the hegemony's strength against them. Supreme Commander Zerion watched in horror as his invincible fleet was slowly torn apart by an enemy that should have been helpless. His tactical display showed something else, something that chilled him to his crystalline core. Other species were watching. The Corvani, the Theta, even the ancient Malori were observing this battle. And in their encrypted communications, he detected something that had never been directed at the hegemony before. Hope. The turning point came when humanity revealed their final secret. Dr. Yuki Nakamura had not just studied hegemony technology. She had discovered its fundamental flaw. The Zenari's crystalline bodies and their ships operated on the same quantum frequency. By broadcasting a specific disruption wave, humanity could shatter both simultaneously. Marcus gave the order with a heavy heart. He took no pleasure in what had to be done, but the hegemony had left them no choice. The disruption wave pulsed out from Earth, invisible but devastating. Across the Grand Armada, Zenari commanders screamed as their crystalline forms began to crack. Their ships, built with the same crystal technology, fractured like glass under tension. Within minutes, the mighty armada was reduced to glittering debris floating in the void. Only a few ships, those crewed by non-Zenari species, remained intact. They surrendered immediately. The aftermath moved quickly. News of the hegemony's defeat spread across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. On 100 worlds, species that had lived under hegemony rule for millennia suddenly realized that their masters were not invincible. Rebellions erupted everywhere. The Corvani overthrew their overseers. The Theta reclaimed their homeworld. The Malori, oldest of all subjected species, emerged from their forced isolation with ancient weapons the hegemony had thought destroyed. Within a month, delegations from 17 species arrived at Earth, seeking alliance with the humans who had done the impossible. Marcus Kane, now promoted to Fleet Admiral of the United Earth Forces, met with each delegation personally. Humanity's terms were simple and fair. They would share the technology needed to resist any future oppression. They would help establish a new galactic council where all species had equal voice, and they would ensure that never again would one species hold dominion over others. The Zenari High Council, what remained of it after the disruption wave, arrived at Earth seeking terms. They were broken, their empire shattered, their military might reduced to nothing. They expected enslavement or extinction, the fate they had planned for humanity. Instead, President Chen Wei offered them something they had never offered others: mercy. The Zenari would be given a choice. They could join the new galactic community as equals, abandoning their supremacist ideology, or they could retreat to their homeworld and isolation. But they would never again be masters of other species. Some Zenari accepted the offer, beginning the long process of learning to live as equals rather than rulers. Others chose isolation, unable to accept a galaxy where they were not supreme. High Chancellor Vorix, stripped of his position and power, stood one last time before the Earth Council. You have won this round, humans, but the galaxy is vast and full of dangers you cannot imagine. Without the hegemony's protection, you will face threats that will destroy you. Admiral Kane responded for humanity. Perhaps you are right, Chancellor. But we will face those threats as free beings, not as subjects. We will stand or fall on our own strength, allied with others who choose freedom over safety. And if we fall, at least we will fall fighting, not kneeling. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, as historians would name it, Earth stood at the center of a new galactic alliance. The United Free Worlds, as it came to be known, grew stronger each day. Species that had never imagined cooperation without domination learned to work together. Humanity's phoenix had not just risen from the ashes of submission. It had lit a fire that spread across the stars, burning away the old order of masters and subjects. The treaty had been broken, but not by humanity. And in breaking it, the hegemony had freed not just Earth, but dozens of worlds. The age of empires built on submission was ending. The age of alliance and equality had begun. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, building strength in secret, waiting for their oppressors to make one mistake. When that mistake came, they were ready. They had broken their chains and helped others break theirs. In his final log entry as military commander, Admiral Marcus Kane wrote words that would be taught to children across 100 worlds. We were told that strength meant dominance, that power meant control over others. But true strength is lifting others up, not holding them down. True power is the choice to show mercy when you have every reason for revenge. Humanity was never weak. We were patient. And when the moment came, we chose to be better than those who had oppressed us. That is our gift to the galaxy. Not our weapons or our technology, but our belief that freedom is worth any risk and that together, free species can achieve what no empire ever could. The stars no longer seemed distant to Marcus as he stood on the observation deck of the new Unity station. Built where the hegemony's command post had once orbited, ships from dozens of species came and went freely, trading, exploring, sharing knowledge without fear. Earth turned below, no longer a subject world but a beacon of hope for all who sought freedom among the stars. The treaty was broken, and in its breaking, the galaxy had been reborn.